beauties. Not entirely thrilled with this. These eyebrows, they have their own mind and they're like taking over my face. Bear with me, my nails are also very wet. But I wanted to do one of the historical videos that I've been talking about, which this one, obviously, Cleopatra. Like I said, it's just these eyebrows. I made an attempt to carve them out, because back then they would have, you didn't have the ability in all colors that we have now. So, they used natural things. So, their eyebrows were rather dark, and they came down and everything. If you look at, a lot of the hieroglyphics. But with Cleopatra, I always admired her because this was a woman way ahead of her time. She wasn't exactly an attractive woman. Despite Hollywood's depictions of her, because of she was known for her abilities to seduce. So it was assumed that she must have been so beautiful because, how else could she seduce two of the most powerful Romans to ever live? Well, it wasn't so much her looks. She was very ambitious. She had a great deal of knowledge. She was highly educated. She was the first of the Ptolemy clan dynasty to learn Egyptian. She also embraced the culture, the religion, the just going to the festivals that the Egyptians had. And, no other pharaoh did that. It was unheard of. It's said that she spoke about a dozen languages. But, how we know that she wasn't really attractive is by her coins. She had a very masculine appeal to her. She had a large crooked nose, a very strong jawline, very masculine jawline, which she did like to play up because it showed strength, just like a man. And some historians there's been, I think I have this somewhere in my notes because I wrote down some notes because I didn't want to trust my memory. But some historians have mistaken statues to be her that were found like in Rome and stuff. And whereas she wasn't loved in Rome, and women would talk about her and things of that nature, just like today. They may talk about you, but they want to be you. And so they adopted her style, her way of doing makeup and the pearls and the way she dressed and the flamboyancy of it all, because she was. Now, she was married to her brother Ptolemy III. He ran her out when she tried to take over the throne solely. And so she was kind of, in exile, because if she came back into Alexandria, his guards and army and everything would get rid of her. She heard Caesar was in the palace, and she knew she needed to get him as an ally. And so, she knew she couldn't just mosey into the palace. So it's believed that she wrapped herself in a carpet and delivered to his private quarters. And at the time, Caesar supported her brother. But once, because she had a way with theatrics, once, she did that and he's seen her, he changed his tune, and it wasn't long before they became lovers. Because again, she was just great at the art of seduction. And then later he was drowned in the Nile. Now, whether or not she actually did that, who knows? Because he was supposedly just, he drowned. But it's believed that she had her hand in. She was then married to her younger brother, Ptolemy IV. And it's believed that she poisoned him to stay, remain the sole person on the throne. Then in about 41 BC, she engineered to have her sister Arsinoe executed, and that was done in front of one of the temples, which was a huge no-no in itself, because you just like today, if somebody were executed right in front of a church or a synagogue or a mosque, wouldn't go over so well. And that was the case then as well. Now, like I said, she embraced the culture of the Egyptians. She was not Egyptian. A lot of people believe she was. She was actually Mesopotamian, grew up Greek, and ruled over Egypt and seduced to the most powerful Romans. I mean, that's something that would happen in this time. This was all before Christ. And she was doing all this. And again, a woman being so highly educated. And it wasn't just, being educated. She was educated in math and philosophy, in astronomy, okay? Politics. She was groomed by her father before he died. And so following the religious practices at the time, she associated herself in the image of Isis, one of the goddesses. And it was a practice that reinforced that pharaohs were divine. Much like with royalty, with kings. It's always, God placed them on the throne. Well, kind of same thing with the pharaoh was, it was their divinity that allowed them to rule. Now, just as she used theatrics to introduce herself to Caesar, it's believed that she used a different set of theatrics, which is really cool, and it's depicted in film. She was summoned by Mark Antony to come to Tarsus, and so she did so in a gilded boat that had silver oars. Her attendants were dressed as cupids and fanning her, and she herself was dressed to appear as Aphrodite. And the boat had all kinds of, purple sails and everything, which, if you look at any of royalty or anything like that in history, you'll notice the theme of purple. It's a regal color. And it wasn't a color that, a slave or a peasant or, whatever culture you're dealing with, a lower person, for lack of better words, would even dare to wear. Because it was reserved for royalty and things of that nature. And then, but before she started things up with Mark Antony, she traveled to Rome with Caesar, because the Senate was very upset with the amount of time he was spending in Egypt because of her. And so he knew he had to go back to Rome, but he didn't want to be separated from her or their child. His name was Caesarion. Well, they called him Caesarion, which was Little Caesar. And it was quite the scandal because, one, Caesar's wife was well respected in Rome. Being a senator's wife was a high position. And he, a lot of the men had affairs, but they always loved their wives and treated them with respect and kept things discreet. Caesar wasn't discreet in the least bit. Bringing Cleopatra in there and then their child, and made, didn't try to cover up the fact that she was his mistress. And so, and then putting her up in her own home and such. And then he had a statue, a gilded statue, created of her and placed in one of the temples. I don't remember which one. But, him falling for Cleopatra was his undoing. Just like a lot of men. He was eventually stabbed to death. At a Senate meeting. It was March 15th of 44 BC. There's a saying, beware the Ides of March, which is how we know the date, because the Ides are half of the month. Due to him being killed, she had to flee Rome back to Egypt, because they probably would have killed her too. Let's see here. I'm like totally lost because I am going by memory as well. Now her affair with Mark Antony. I mean, they were smitten with each other and things of that nature, but it was more out of political need for both. She needed his protection to secure her reign over Egypt. He needed Egypt's riches and resources. And eventually, my hair is driving me insane today. Eventually, they were married, and a lot of people are aware that she had the son with Caesar. Not many are aware that she had 3 children with Mark Antony. She had, I believe it was a daughter and then twins. And the twins were boy and girl, and they were named, I can't think of what the boy's name was, but the girl was Cleopatra Selene. But their names meant sun and moon. And then while Mark Antony, while Mark Antony was in Egypt, his rival Octavian was using propaganda to portray Mark Antony as a traitor who was beguiled by Cleopatra. And painted her as this great seductress. Then in 32 BC, the Senate declared war on Cleopatra. But her fleet and Mark Antony's fleet were no match for Octavian's army. His navy. So soon they had decided they had to break through the lines and flee to Egypt because they knew it was a losing battle. Now, it wasn't too long, it was like 2 years, that they each committed suicide. And it's always believed that, she thought he was dead, so she committed suicide, and then when he found out that she committed suicide, he then committed suicide. And it was all out of love, Romeo, Juliet kind of thing. That wasn't the case. it was common practice for a general to parade the prisoner around Rome. She wasn't going to have that. So it's always been portrayed that, she took this asp and everything, which historians have said wouldn't have been an asp. Could have been an Egyptian cobra, or another very poisonous snake. Anyway, it's, been believed that, she was taunting and enticing the snake to bite her, to kill her. Which would have been an extraordinarily painful death. But, let's see, because I know I'm not going to remember his name. No, I don't have my glasses. But there's no way I could read this. Plutarch. I think that's how you say it. He was an ancient chronological biographer, more or less, writer, okay, scribe. He said that, no one really knows how she did it, but she was known to dabble in poisons and keep a poison comb in her hair. So it's kind of believed that that's actually how she died. Mark Antony stabbed himself in the stomach. There's no one really knows if it, because, like I said, they weren't this great love affair. She loved Caesar a great deal. With Mark Antony, it was more of a camaraderie and a need that they got together. Not for this great love. I don't remember exactly when or why, but Octavian changed his name to Augustus. And when and he more or less became very popular himself due to his defeat of Cleopatra. And he was quite upset at not having her as a prisoner to parade around Rome. So he basically had an effigy made of her to parade around Rome. Because he was denied that privilege. Now, he was also given an opportunity to have a month named after him. Instead of choosing his birth month of September, he chose the 8th month, which is why it's August. He did that because that's when she killed herself. So every year it was celebrated. He would bring out the effigy and parade it around personally, I think Augustus might have been a little off his rocker. But there were plenty of in history that were off their rockers. Don't even want to get started on King Henry. It is believed that Mark Antony killed himself because there was no place of honor for him anymore. He was always a soldier first, and a very good soldier. So not having that honor was a big thing. Well, that was all my notes. Yep. That was all she wrote. But an interesting fact too, Cleopatra was instrumental in building up the library in Alexandria. And, you know, it had a lot of philosophy. You know, you had Socrates and Plato and all of them. And ironically, there was a diagram that was in there when it burned. You know, because that's one of the things that Augustus did, was he come in and he burned Alexandria. The library was one of the first places because he knew that was like the heart of her education and all of this. The diagram, ironically, was very futuristic. Very past tense for us, but futuristic for them. It was of a fire truck, one of those where you pump it and it sprays through the hose, which I found to be highly ironic because it burned. You know, had they had such a device, they might have been able to save a lot more. You know, because it wasn't like everything that was in there was completely destroyed. Just a good portion of it, and who knows what we would have been able to determine, you know, had a lot of it not burned. Another interesting fact, and this is kind of like a your mind. She was actually closer to the time of Pizza Hut than to the pyramids being built. Yet, when you think of her, you're thinking in terms of, you know, the pyramids being built and so forth. But her time was actually closer to the first Pizza Hut than it was to the building of the pyramids. Also, her tomb has never been found. It's rumored that she had her and Mark Antony entombed in a hidden place, which a lot of times a pharaoh who would have been a little on the unpopular side, like Cleopatra was, would have done that. You know, a lot were found in Kings Valley, but her sarcophagus, her mummy, None of it has been found. And I want to say that it's believed it's under something to where, and it's something famous, to where archaeologists wouldn't be able to attempt because of the history of what it's under, and I can't remember. But, you know, she was just a remarkable person, in my opinion. You know, to be so accomplished, so independent, so strong, so, you know, didn't need anybody other than political optics. Okay? She would have been fine on her own had she not needed the protection of Rome to keep her on the throne. So, that's today's little history lesson, along with the makeup and these things, which will take me a month of Sundays to get off. So, until next time, goodbye, my beauties.